Welcome to Whiskey Gaming, and this is my live review of Rainbow Six Vegas 2. I play on the Xbox Series X via backwards compatibility. It's also available on the Xbox One, Xbox 360, and PC. So Rainbow Six Vegas 2 takes place both before and after Rainbow Six Vegas, though predominantly before. And you play once again as a Rainbow Six team that is basically chasing a pair of coyotes who have created a regular bomb and a chemical weapons bomb, and they've decided to go full terrorist, which I feel is kind of a stretch. Which is kind of how I felt about this story in general. It felt like a bunch of ideas they had for the first game that they then kind of cobbled together into a game here and then tried to flesh out. And they did the best they could, and it does become passable, but it just doesn't feel cohesive for the longest time. And like I said, it's passable. It's not something that's going to pull you through the game. I feel like the gameplay pulls you through the game more than the story does. And I quite frankly didn't feel like any of the villains were great villains, so there's that. But let's move on to the audio, and the first thing I'm gonna say is the music is there, it works, but it's not something you're gonna think about or remember ever again. I literally couldn't remember any of it right now. As for the voiceover work, I think it's overall better than the first game. It's still nothing that's necessarily spectacular, but it is better. And then you have the sound effects, which are well done. I think the sound effects are excellent. I think they work very well, whether it's the guns, whether it's any of that. I would say that the sound effects still run into similar issues as in the first game. Like, you'll know an LMG from an AR, but you're not gonna know which LMG or which AR. I think there's a few weapons where you can definitely tell a difference, but not a ton. Now let's move on to the gameplay mechanics and whatnot, and this is once again a tactical FPS. Even on normal mode, it is much harder than most FPSs out there. You get hit a few times, you're pretty much done. You go down to a checkpoint, which that checkpoint is gonna be shitty. I found a lot of these checkpoints were really shitty. Your teammates go down, you can pick them up, but they all take a lot more damage than in something like Call of Duty on normal. They did make some cool improvements, specifically with the weapons. You now have marksman, CQB, and assault points. And the more assault points you get, the more certain types of weapons you'll unlock. Same with marksman and CQB, which I thought that was cool. And that stuff will also unlock new armor, which you can equip better armor, and you can change up your outfit. You can really customize your character a lot more in this game. And then of course you have your squad, which I gotta say, I felt the squad AI was actually worse in this game than in the first game, which that's weird. This being a sequel, it should be far better. But these ass clowns would get caught on all sorts of geometry. I basically went through almost an entire area from loading screen to loading screen with just one dude, because one of the other dudes got caught somewhere and he wouldn't unfuck himself, which also really limited things because they won't stack up on a door if you don't have both of them there. So it made it actually very difficult to get through that area, and it was very frustrating. But they get hung up on all sorts of shit. They won't move out of your way. We almost got fragged to fuck one time. Somehow, despite the fact the frag indicator was on the screen and it went off, we survived. But it was not in any way due to the help of my AI companion. But overall gameplay is very similar. You have your teammates, you command them to do things like open a door, clear the room, flashbang the door, frag the door, whatever, any of that stuff. Go here, go there, shoot these guys. The tagging is way better in this. Like when you're snake camming under a door and you want to mark specific targets for them, it's done in a much better way, although you are still limited on how many targets you can target. So that's a positive, but overall with how shitty their AI is, they're kind of a negative. I mean, they are useful, but they also do a lot of dumb shit that gets in the way. It's a tough balance, and I felt the first game did better, even though I felt the first game had its limits as well. You're still very much going mission to mission, point A to point B, get to this objective, wipe out these dudes, rescue these hostages, shoot these people, you know, defuse this bomb, etc. I think the gameplay works well, and it does, like I said earlier, pull you through the game a lot more than the story does, especially like the progression. I wanted to unlock these new weapons. I wanted to really progress my assault tree, my CQB tree, my whatever. You of course have the multiplayer and the terrorist house and all that stuff, which is fun, or terrorist hunt. That was always a fun co-op thing to do once you beat the game and you just play that and try and figure it out and get better at it. Playing in co-op always made that a lot more fun. I rolled solo through the campaign this time around, did some co-op terrorist hunt and had a good time with that. Now let's move on to the controls, and they're basically Rainbow Six Vegas 1's controls. So really weirdly mapped out, but you do get used to it. But I did find them to be overall responsive. I didn't have any real issues with aiming or moving or anything like that. The only times I had issues moving was when my idiot AIs wouldn't get out of my fucking way. And then lastly, graphics and visuals. And the first thing I'm going to say is it doesn't look as muddy as the first one did. I know my gameplay footage from the first one didn't look as bad, but when I was playing it, it looked a lot more muddy. There were areas that looked clear. But in this game, everything looked so much cleaner. Although I do still think the thermal and night vision kind of sucked in the dark, which is unfortunate because they're really all you have in certain dark areas. They're extremely limited on range, which is their problem. But man, when there's dark areas, it gets dark. But overall, I'm going to say graphically, I do think it is an upgrade. Not a massive upgrade, but it does look better. It does look cleaner. The body armor still does not look great, but you know, the shotgun shells didn't look quite as welded into the vest as they did in the first game. And when your character was talking, giving commands, it actually looked far better than in the first game. I mean, this is still an Xbox 360 game. This is still a very old game, and visually it looks pretty shitty. But I think they did a better job because you don't spend as much time specifically in casinos, which always felt very same to me in the first game. You spend a good amount of time in hotels, urban areas, and I think they did a good job differentiating those. You spend some time on like a fucking college campus. That looked well done in my opinion. I think they did a better job with the environments overall, giving you a bit more of a variety and not making them all look so much the same. I think the weapons were pretty well done. I don't think they were flawless. I don't think any of the effects were flawless. Again, older game. But I do think overall, I think it still looked fairly good. It's passable. If graphics are a huge deal to you, yeah, you're not gonna want this. But if graphics aren't a huge deal, I do think they work well enough. They give you what you need the majority of the time to do what you're trying to do. And they definitely get across what they're trying to build in the area, I guess you'd call it. Although there was one thing that just drove me insane the entire time. Whenever your dudes are stacked up, they always have their back to their wall and then they turn into the door instead of having their weapons ready pointed at the door and then going in. Oh, it drove me nuts because you just probably wouldn't see that in modern games. They put a lot more effort into doing that kind of stuff from a visual standpoint correctly. But oh man, I don't know why. It just hurt me watching that every time in this game. Okay, so let's move on. I didn't run into any major glitches, anything that really wrecked the experience for me. I can't actually think of any. So let's just move on to the wrap up. And overall, I think this was enjoyable. I remember thinking this was much better than like the replay of it is. Like back when I played it originally, I remember thinking this was really amazing. But going back and replaying it, I don't feel the same. I honestly feel that the first one, despite, you know, some of its drawbacks, was superior. Which that's really not supposed to happen. The sequel should always be better. I would recommend picking it up dirt cheap. I picked it up on a sale for $5. I may have a physical copy somewhere. I just don't know where it is right now, so I bought it digitally. But if you're paying more than $5 for it, I wouldn't. I don't recommend that. If you already own it and you suddenly get the bug to play it, I can't say there's a reason not to unless you're one of those graphics snobs. But I'd rather go back and play the first one again. Okay, so in the comments down below, why don't you tell me, have you ever played a game and then played its sequel and been like, oh wow, the first one was so much better? And I don't mean just on pure nostalgia, I've played both of these very recently. As always, thanks for watching. If you enjoyed the video, please hit that like button. And if you like what I'm doing in general, share and subscribe. Have a good one.